Alrighty, so I've already introduced you to our wonderful guest. Um, so, Lauren, what is it exactly that we were going to talk about today?
I am down to talk about most things, but I think maybe top of mind is accessibility and disability rights.
Yes, and you know what? It's so funny. I've been waiting so long to do a segment on this. I am back to working in an office some days a week, and I noticed. So I went to use the restroom on my floor. I'm on the 13th floor. The walk is terrible, but anyway. So I noticed that it's so on the bathroom it says accessible restrooms on the 12th floor, and I'm thinking, well, that's strange. I don't have to go to a different floor to use the restroom, and I'm perfectly well able. So I thought to myself, you know what? Some buildings only have one, gender or sex of restroom on a floor. So let me just check, see if there's a women's bathroom, right? Because then, maybe it makes more sense. So I go to the other side of the hall, and lo and behold, there's a women's restroom. So it turns out if you are, if you need accessibility or if you are handicapped or disabled or differently abled in some way, I'm sorry, you don't get to use the bathroom on your floor. And it bothered me so much. It's not my company's building, right? We just rent in there, but it bothered me so much. I wanted to do a segment about it. And then I thought to myself, actually, I know someone who has done a ton of advocacy about this, who is very knowledgeable and has some personal experience to speak of. So, this just works out perfectly.
Oh no, I'm honored that you thought of me, and yeah, I think maybe my passion started really whenever it impacted my family. My grandfather was in an accident and lost the use of his arms and legs. So I grew up with a very strong awareness about what it's like to not really have any government there to help you whenever unforeseen circumstances happen. And they do. And I also grew up with an understanding that that could happen to me and anybody. So one day you're walking, the next day you're not. One day you can hear perfectly fine, the next day you can't. I also have a friend who is 85% blind. In one eye, she's 100% blind, and in the other eye, she's 85% blind. And just a few years ago, she wasn't. So things happen, and I think we as a society think about disabilities as like other, other than us, not part of our group or whatever. But I think we need to start really embracing the fact that if we take care of every single person in our society and make sure that every American has their basic needs and rights, then I mean, that could be you taking care of you someday. Why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah, and you know what? The thing that's kind of funny, and I mean that in a melancholic way, is that the American psyche is very much accept with it won't happen to me, right? And we're seeing that play out all over the country, unfortunately, right now with the pandemic. But
Yeah.
it's really it's an opinion that's kind of endemic to Americans in general, right? It's hard to care about something unless it's right in front of you. It's hard to advocate for something unless it's right in front of you. So we have this law in America, the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's been the law of the land for decades now. So why wasn't this the panacea?
Well, in my opinion, the ADA, I'm so glad that it exists and people fought really hard for it. Um, but there's still so many ways that people are falling through the cracks. I just had a guest on, and I would really recommend anybody watching this watches the episode. But I just had a guest on who started an organization to talk about the need to close loopholes to prevent people with disabilities from being able to access Medicaid. And there are so many ways in which, for example, if this guest of mine got a job or got married, he loses the amount of benefits that he is able to get. So any kind of changes, like I just got married, I didn't have to think about like losing my source of income if I
Yeah.
got married. I didn't have to think about losing my healthcare. In fact, me getting married to Paul has allowed me to stay on his health insurance. So I feel like people with disabilities are having to navigate things that they shouldn't. And I've had conversations with people, and it's so simple, the daily problems that they face. And I think about, I've taken some time to have these conversations. I've lived the experience with my family and my grandfather, but all it really takes is the ability to listen. And if you're a member of Congress and you're getting paid, what is it, $175,000 per year, and you have summers off essentially, why can't you have some conversations with people with disabilities in your district and just listen to how you can help them? I feel like we celebritize these politicians when instead we should just expect that they do their job, and they don't.
Oh, 100%. And the thing that's interesting, and just kind of listening to you talk about it, I remember when you were actually running for Congress yourself, you spent a lot of time talking about disability access, specifically in terms of New York subway systems. For those of us watching who were not glued to your campaign like I was, you want to talk a little bit about the New York subway system and accessibility in general?
Yeah, it's just one of so many examples of how, like, people with disabilities are just not even part of the equation for these politicians when they're making decisions. So only about 24% of subway stations in New York City are accessible, which means you would have to travel way out of your way to use the subway, and then you might not be able to get off at the stop that's most convenient to you and where you're trying
Yeah.
to go. So the fact that all this time, all these years, um, like all these decisions that have gotten made, I'm at a loss for words at how, hey, how are people with wheelchairs or crutches or people with strollers? Not even people with disabilities, but people travel with strollers all the time. Like, how are they supposed to use the subway? And I've seen women carry things like strollers up the stairs, and I always offer to help them carry it. But, like, my goodness, no one should have to carry their stroller up 3 flights of stairs to be able to take the subway. Anyway, at the end of the day, politicians just don't think about the everyday person or people with disabilities. And it's really obvious to me that we have elected at every level of office a bunch of elite people who are bought by corporations. And that's really all they think about, is how to get their buddies more money.
Yeah, 100%, and it leaves lots of people behind. I just wanted just to pull a tangent off the point you made. You don't even have to be disabled, or you don't have to be a person with a stroller. What if you need to go to JFK, right? You need to get to the airport. You have a suitcase, right? That's going to be a pain to get down this other thing too, right? I mean,
Yes.
there are so many ways that we can think about this and relate it to ourselves, right? If we're going to be stuck in this mindset of this psyche that like it has to happen to us in order for us to care, like think about
Yes.
all the ways that can happen to you. It can, it will. I was just traveling and I had to use the subway to get to the station I could get to the airport from, and I had to haul 2 bags down a multi-directional staircase. I'm like, first of all, I mean, I've got the use of my hands and all that good stuff, but I cannot imagine what it would be like if for some reason I struggled or had some other issue.
Yeah, and there actually was recently, maybe it was 2 years ago at this point because time flies, but there was a mother that was pushing a stroller, carrying it down the stairs, and she fell and died
Oh my
in
God.
the subway. So all these things happen and continue to happen, and nothing changes. And it's not just subways. I think one of the things that I wish I did more of campaigning was talk about like visible versus invisible disabilities,
Mm.
and people who have lower mobility, like my grandfather, obviously struggle in very obvious ways. But also, there's there are people, and this is something that I just saw come up in conversation, and I wholeheartedly agree. Actually, I think the ACLU is suing over this, which they're one of the best organizations that have ever existed. But they're suing regarding how certain governments are trying to ban mask mandates in schools, because what's essentially happening is these schools are discriminating, or these governments are discriminating against kids with disabilities. Because if you're severely immune compromised, for example, if you have rheumatoid arthritis and you're on medicine that helps to reverse the symptoms that you feel, then your immune system is suppressed, and
Right.
if somebody with COVID coughs on you, that could seriously mean that you will die.
Yeah.
And even if they're vaccinated, like anyone else who's vaccinated, we don't know exactly how much it's protecting them versus how much it's protecting me, who I'm not taking a medicine that's suppressing my immune system. So essentially, we're discriminating against people with disabilities because people don't believe in science. I don't understand, but there's so many different ways that I mean, even the fact that there are major YouTube channels that until recently didn't caption. For example, it's like, damn, like people just don't necessarily think about how what they do is impacting people with disabilities.
Yeah, 100%. And you know what, too? Like the fact that there's a threshold to be accessible is ridiculous. Like you need 1,000 subscribers and I think what 100,000 views or something like that to get.
Yeah.
It's essentially once you hit 1,000 subscribers and 100,000 views, you can make money, but also you can just show your content to people who are differently able than you. Like that's really fucked up for some, right? Like why?
Yeah.
Like there's no good reason for that. If you
Yeah,
have
because
a
the people on
platform,
YouTube, they don't care, and I think
yeah.
it's not the ideal medium. It's also maybe as a YouTube creator, you've experienced the same thing, but I feel like in every direction you just kind of get throttled or stopped a little bit too from being able to grow your channel, and that's another conversation for another day. But
Yes, it is. And we will have it, whether online or offline.
yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah,
no, I was
but
thinking, oh, sorry.
sugar, a cherry on top of that cake is that unless you are a major channel, then you aren't able to have your material viewed by people who are hearing impaired.
Yeah, and just for a second, and I just want to go off that for a second. Imagine that you're a channel set up specifically to serve this population, right? You have to know 1,000 people on top of that who you have to then convince to subscribe to you, and then you have to convince them to watch your stuff 100 times each. Like,
Yep.
just saying that out loud, that is a ridiculous goal that you have to set. Even if you did know the 1,000 people, right? Like, we all have other stuff going on in our lives. So it's just really wild that this is the case. And if you want to serve this audience on a platform that's supposed to allow you to be a creator, and that's even a type of channel that might not just get regular suppressed, right? You might be able to grow your channel, but if you are going to target an audience specifically, and you can't talk to that audience because someone with the keys to the castle who you cannot possibly talk to in 1,000 years is not willing to help you do that, then you're shut out of that too. It's totally nuts.
You are spot on, my friend. Spot on.
The other thing I noticed I thought was interesting. I was thinking about when you mentioned obvious versus inobvious disabilities. Like just anyone who's watching, think about the last time you went to the grocery store. Okay, just the grocery store, where you get food for a living so you can continue to like subsist on this planet that's slowly dying. Okay, just imagine. When's the last time you saw Braille? Literally anywhere, on any sign at all. Do you see it at the deli counter? How about at the butcher? Do you see it in the snack aisle? How about the soda aisle? What about bottled water? There's no Braille anywhere in your supermarket. I can almost guarantee you. So what? We just decide that people who are blind don't get to eat. They don't get to
Mhm.
pick the foods that they want. Like, if you stop and think for a moment, you pick any disability you can think of, visible, invisible, what have you, and you just stop and think about trying to live your life as you live it right now. Just think about the amount of roadblocks you run into. And then you can realize the point that Lauren had made earlier, which was that the people who are supposed to be helping us ain't doing that.
Yeah.
And it's so visibly and invisibly obvious in this kind of case.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with you there. And I mean the list of ways that you could be disabled is kind of endless. I mean, if you have severe anxiety, if you have severe PTSD, if you have severe depression, like these are things you wouldn't necessarily even know if you saw somebody walking through a grocery store. But these these things can prevent somebody from being able to have a job. And I mean, we're supposed to take care of the most vulnerable people. At least I thought
Yeah,
that's what I
absolutely.
thought. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and that's what we were told to believe, and the ADA was supposed to do that. And as we said earlier, it's a great piece of legislation. One of the places it really fails is there's a grandfather clause. And actually, I didn't know about this, and I should because I'm a lawyer, but I didn't know about it until you brought it up on your campaign. That like buildings that are older than a certain date, like we just said, fuck it, you actually don't have to be accessible at all to
Yep.
anyone. And like, okay, but I want to think about that in two ways, right? One, when was there the most money floating around in this system for like building developments and stuff like that? Not since the New Deal, okay? So a lot of these buildings that exist, bridges, highways, subway systems, buses, civil, I call it council housing, it's what it's called in the UK, but any like public works projects, all those were probably built before the 1960s when the ADA finally came into force. So what? We just decided that all of our infrastructure that we built with the one good piece of legislation we've had in this country is just not going to be accessible.
Yeah.
And then it's even worse because the law says, well, if you do renovations of a certain size, then you have to make it accessible. So the incentive then becomes, I'm going to force you to live or breathe or shop in squalor because I'm either too lazy or too poor to make my store accessible. I
Yeah.
mean, the logic falls apart as soon as you breathe it into existence.
Yep. And I think like our government keeps kind of putting like let's say like your aunt had like a small croissant shop or bakery or something like, and she's
Now
had
you're
it
speaking my
since
language. I
night.
love croissants.
And she's had that for like 40 years, but the pandemic has wiped out her business's savings, and she really wishes she were accessible, but doesn't have, like, literally doesn't have that money. Like, our government should actually just cover it. Our government
Oh yeah.
should, I mean, instead of, like we were talking about on my show, sending all these resources towards bombing other countries, what if we spent it here in making sure that everybody can use public transit?
Yeah, and have some more public transit while we're at it. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, like, no, you make a totally good point that I glossed over when I was kind of ranting a second ago. We shouldn't, as individuals, have to pay for this. Like, we have a government that like has effectively has like one of those goofy money cannons you see at baseball games and just fires it
Yeah,
at whichever lobbyist is in the building, right?
exactly.
Like fire it at the subway system,
Yep.
redo the metro. Like,
Yeah,
there's
but
so
we
much we
do
can do with it.
we spend it on destruction, which I think the fact that such a small chunk of the population thinks about it that way is, it really speaks to how we've taken a sledgehammer to our education system as well. So it's just all so broken in so many layers that it's a little bit overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah, well, and that, yeah, don't don't be overwhelmed by it to the extent possible. But yeah, I mean, the thing about disability rights and just kind of in the general conversation is it's as you're right, it's just one of the many things where there isn't much of a conversation going on. Because if you look through Congress too, I think Tammy Duckworth might be the only member of Congress who has a visible disability. I might be wrong on that, but I think she is. And although I want to believe that she's an advocate for disability rights and accessibility, I truly don't know, right? I couldn't opine on that. But like, even if that was a representative sample, it's still too small, right? Like if the government is to serve the people, it needs to look like us, and descriptively and in all sorts of ways, right? And that includes the understanding of how we operate as individuals. Some people are anxious. Some people have invisible disabilities. Some people have visible disabilities. I don't think there is a blind member of Congress, right? Oh, I'm sorry, two, Madison Cawthorn, but I'm not really expecting much from Madison Cawthorn as far as disability access and rights. He did just say the other day he wants to shoot his fellow Americans, so that's fun.
Nice.
Oh yeah, class act. But yeah, so I mean,
Pro-life. Pro-life.
Always. But do we have blind members of Congress? Do we have members of Congress who, widows and widowers? Like, how do we think about who represents us? And we have to think about that word, who represents us, and that just means not just our interests, but how we function, how we live, right? Can you represent us if you make $174,000 a year? I don't know. But I'll tell you, the median salary in the United States is not $174,000 a year. It's not even close. In fact, this is something that Secular Talks cites all the time. Like, half of America makes $30,000 or less, right? Imagine being disabled, having all the challenges that you face, and then knowing in America that the average salary is less than 30 grand. Just take a second to breathe that in. I mean, that's wild.
Like, if you live off of Social Security, like my friend who was on my show lives off of $500 a month.
$500 a month?
$500 a month. And
does he live in like rural Kentucky or something?
Yeah, and but he lives with his family, so they deducted money from the amount that he is owed. So it's just like, God. Okay, then he essentially gets like an allowance, like a $500 allowance. And one of the conversations I had with somebody with disabilities during my campaign, she was saying they live from such a small amount of money, and it's not even like they want a lot. It's like they just want what everyone else has. Like, she was saying, don't I deserve to ever go on vacation? And like, I know that there's going to be somebody that like cringes when I say that. And the first instinct is to cringe at giving more to people who can't, because that's what we've gotten ingrained in our heads in our society, is like, this is mine and mine. And like, if you give any of it away, it hurts you. But the thing is, our government has an endless supply of money, and we just send it, we turn it into tanks and bombs.
Yeah, totally ridiculous. And the thing is too, like, I know we're both socialists, but I'm going to actually make the argument for giving disabled persons vacation from a capitalist perspective. Okay, give me a second. I'm gonna put on my I'm a terrible person face. No, just kidding. But in all seriousness, think of it this way, right? If say you subscribe to capitalism, you're gung ho about profits and markets and things. Think about this, right? Disabled people taking vacations means they're probably going to travel, right? That's buses, that's planes, that's hired cars, bus tickets. It might be tolls, maybe paying into toll roads. Okay, that's generating money. They have to stop and rest somewhere, right? That's a hotel that makes them more money, a restaurant that makes them more money. They go, maybe they go to a theme park, right? Just throwing it out there, right? Theme park makes money. Maybe if enough people like that can visit, they can pay their employees more, right? You can go off and do other things. There's a ripple effect on a capitalist perspective too. This is the argument the conservatives use for UBI.
Sounds like trickle up economics, which I'm a huge fan of, as opposed to trickle down.
Yeah, but that's the thing of it too, right? Like if you do give people more money, especially people who are hurting for it, what are they going to do? They're going to spend it. They're going to pay rent. They're going to buy the extra sandwich at the deli counter, right? They're going to do other things with the money that isn't, hoard it in the Caymans.
Yeah, they might open a business and hire people.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. This is the capitalist argument, right? You guys claim you want the market will take care of things, right? You claim that I don't know that if people just feed into the system, then we'll all be more equal, right? Well, this is how you can do it. You can get people to spend money. You can get people to work in the system if you help them out a little bit, right?
Yeah.
It's not difficult, and actually, because of the way that the velocity of money, and I've talked about this on the show before, you actually generate more economic benefit on the ripple effect than you do just giving them. So imagine you give someone an extra $500, right? So your friend who's making 500,000. Let's just say, and it may not be enough, but let's just say, for example, we give them $1,000. That could change someone's life,
Oh
right?
yeah. Yeah.
And if we just doubled what we were giving people in disability, they could do all sorts of things. And by the way, just from a humanist perspective, aren't they people too? Right?
Yes.
Like you
That's
think
really
you
like
deserve your vacations, right?
yes. Yes, and like these like people with disabilities sometimes cannot work. So what's it mean? They should just sit there and think about their disability and sorry, your life is hard and it's not your problem, or like I thought we were better than that.
And you know
So
what's funny too? We hear all these arguments from people who are anti-abortion about like, oh, but what if they cure cancer? What if they're an artist? What if they okay, disabled people too, right? What if they cure cancer? What if they are the next great artist? What if they design the next kick-ass video game? Right? Like if you're going to make the argument in good faith that you think fetuses should be saved because X, Y, or Z thing, then you have to deal with people who are already here, right?
yeah.
Two.
Yeah, people need to be provided for if a parent can't do it, which is often the case, especially after a global pandemic where nobody helped them, then the government needs to step in and make sure that every single American has their basic needs met. And that's so simple to me. I,
I can see your brain breaking as you think about why we just don't do this automatically.
yeah. Yeah, and I think like honestly, and I've had conversations with people that are pro-life, which it hurts me a little bit, but I've had conversations with people who are pro-life and then they're consistently anti-war and anti-death penalty, and I'm like, oh, okay, like I like all right, pro-life actually hurts more people, and like banning abortions in fact leads to more abortions.
Yes.
Anyway, that's a conversation for another day. But if you're consistent and like not wanting to stop any heartbeats, like at least I can understand where you're coming from.
Mm-hmm.
But so many times pro-life people are like, yeah, fuck it. Don't get a vaccine. I shouldn't have to wear a mask. Pro death penalty, let's bomb the Middle East. And I'm just like,
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I don't know about all that. Yeah, it's frustrating, but truthfully, I think at the end of the day, we need to think in this great large landmass that we call the U.S. of A. The show, like the moment you become differently abled, it could be literally any second of your life, just could be, and you will never ever know that moment until it happens to you. And so I ask you genuinely from the bottom of my heart, if something were to happen to you, you the general viewer, wouldn't you want someone to help you through it? What if you've never been differently abled before? What if it was a new experience for you? What if you woke up one day, you went to check your phone and you couldn't see anything, right? What if, you went to get out of bed and realized that you couldn't feel your legs. Your legs wouldn't move. Nothing functioned the way it did the day before. Wouldn't you want someone somewhere to care about you, to give you help? It can be a helpless situation. It's like being alone, but on a grand, massive scale. So don't you think someone should be thinking of you? Not you in specific, but shouldn't you be able to call someone, be like, hey, all of a sudden this, or have a resource that's well publicized that you might know, maybe with a catchy jingle even, right? Something that you could have that's easy for you to comprehend, that you can just go get help.
Yep.
I personally don't think the answer is particularly difficult.
It isn't. It isn't. But that's, we just got to keep raising awareness. But it is important that we do keep having these conversations. And if you're listening, share this conversation with people. Have conversations with people with disabilities. And I really love, like, one of the movies that I think does such a good job capturing how things can change in an instant. Ben, have you seen The Sound of Metal?
I have not. Tell me about it.
It's so good. It's very emotional, but it's about a drummer who, spent his youth drumming, and that's loud. And then maybe in his late 20s, his hearing started to go, and he started having like a ringing in his ear, and it got progressively worse. And he ended up basically going completely deaf. And this has happened. It happens either from loud noises or genetics, but you can just lose your hearing very quickly. And you just don't know when it's going to pop up. Like, my father is hearing impaired, and it happened to him in college. And he didn't play drums or go to rock concerts or anything. It just happened, and it happens to some people in the family lineage. So that's just genetics as well. But anyway, he navigates, dealing with it, and lives with a community that is deaf, and teaches him sign language, and has to make a decision about whether he wants a cochlear implant or not. And a cochlear implant is around $30,000 and not covered by insurance.
Oh.
So he had to sell everything that he owned in order to maybe hear again. And it's not even the same kind of hearing. One of the reasons, other than the fact that he was a metal drummer, one of the reasons that it's called The Sound of Metal is because cochlear implants make things sound kind of like they're being communicated to you through like a metal pipe, for example. So it sounds distorted. Yeah, and you actually get to hear what it sounds like, which I think everybody should do. And you get to, there's parts of the film that are silent, which is scary for people like me that never really put myself in that situation. But people who are deaf also didn't put themselves in that situation. It happened to them. So just another reason that I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah, no, I mean that sounds like a really powerful film, and I don't know if you know this about me, but I'm a crier. So if I see a sad movie, like, I'm gonna always tears, even happy movies, like trying to happy movie. Yeah, I don't watch a ton of movies. That's probably why. But yeah, no, I mean, yeah, and as you should. We need to see, part of representation is also in our media, right? To see people who don't look like us, who don't sound like us, who aren't able like us. And I say us, obviously speaking for myself and people who are similarly able as myself, of course, but like, this kind of goes back to the thing that we said at the top of the program, which was, it's hard to empathize with something unless it happens to you. But like, this is a very cheap and safe way to experience the world from someone else's perspective. there are also museum exhibits. I forget where it was that I saw it. They did I think it was one of the museums in Philadelphia, but I can't think which one it was. That essentially like did an exhibit on what it's like to be it was blind or deaf. Again, it was a while ago. I don't remember. But you went through and you just kind of like you experienced the art from that person's perspective.
Wow.
And yeah, it totally like changes the way like you think about things. Um, Too, you don't know it until you know it, right? So having that moment where you're sitting silent in the film, hearing an echoey sound as the only sound you could ever hear, right? You start to think about these things from the other person's perspective. And actually, that's a wild. I didn't know about cochlear implants not being covered by insurance and being 30 grand. That's
Yeah.
an absolute crime.
Yeah, because it's not a right to be able to hear or experience in the same way that we do, which
Yeah.
is upsetting. And actually, one of the conversations I had with somebody back in the day when I was thinking about running is the pursuit of happiness,
Mm.
like life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Um, we actually make it really difficult to pursue happiness unless you come from privilege in this country. And I just think that's not really what we signed up for.
Yeah, no, we definitely didn't. I was thinking while you said that about the privilege, I thought to myself, oh my God, I have a separate vision plan from my insurance plan, right? Like if for some reason, and I could opt out of it. I could opt out, and I did, by the way. But I could opt out of having a vision plan, right? What if for whatever reason, like suddenly I needed glasses, right? I don't need glasses now. I don't need contacts now. But what if I did? What I have to wait a month to sign on to the vision plan? I have to take extra money out of my salary to see. And what if I don't
Yeah.
have that kind of time, right? Like, what if I need to drive to work and I need glasses like tomorrow? I can't wait a month.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And like we don't have vision insurance, and I think our dental insurance is pretty much useless, the plan that we have, because nobody takes it.
Oh, of course.
Which is
That's
another
always the best. That's the best thing. Yeah.
yeah. And we might just opt to pay out of pocket next time because um nobody takes our dental insurance, and that means that you can go to maybe 5 dentists that have 1 star on Yelp, for example, and it's
Oh
pretty obvious
no.
why. But that's another
Oh
thing, like with
no.
Medicare for all, there wouldn't be networks anymore.
So it's funny that you say that because I literally was just going to say, like, let's talk about how we can fund all of this. Yeah, Medicare for all. And by the way, like, whatever you heard about Medicare for all, like, essentially, think about it this way, right? You're sick. You go to literally any doctor within the United States and its territories, and a doctor sees you and you walk out the door, and then nothing else happens to you other than, possibly they call you for a follow-up visit. That's it. Wow, that's amazing. What if you need glasses? Okay, hey, your grocery store, you have an extra 5 minutes? Just pop in. If they have an appointment, no money down. I sound like a used car salesman, right? 0% interest, but like forever.
Yeah.
Right? Like the, we're talking about access and rights, and like we talked about it from a very much like a physical perspective and like understanding individuals' needs, but like think about it from their financial perspective too. Medicare for all, any doctor you could possibly need for anything at all, it's just covered. And if we get that system, the one that Bernie's been proposing since he was like 12, we can have a better universal system than anywhere in the world. Like people claim
Yeah.
that people claim that, oh, like people come to America for healthcare now. No, people would really come to America, and I'd be happy to give them free healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah, and like the other thing is, people also go to Canada for healthcare. People also go to Germany for healthcare. Like
People
sometimes
go to
there's a
Mexico
really
for
good,
pills. Yeah.
yeah, sometimes there's a really great specialist that's outside of your country, and you're saving up in cash to be able to deal with that. And I hate that argument because Americans leave for specialists and healthcare all the time too.
Yeah, if you're in Texas, you need to leave the state for a certain specialist at the moment too. So this terrible pipe dream of socialist medicine is right is in some way that we got the worst part. We didn't get the free healthcare part. We got the people fleeing states for healthcare part. You know.
Yep. Exactly. But they have $10,000 for every Uber driver.
Oh yeah.
You get a
Because
reward for harassing anyone involved in that. So
because Uber drivers are notoriously, actually, very infamously, have just $10,000 on hand and court
yeah,
fees. Always,
I'm
they
not
just do.
saying
Money.
I'm not saying to report Ted Cruz as having abortions, but I'm not saying to do that.
As a lawyer, I'm not going to comment on that, but you guys can do what you want. Remember, freedom.
We're not advising for you to report Ted Cruz.
We are definitely
No.
not doing that. You should not do that. Yeah, no, 100% don't do that. Bad idea. Where is it? No, definitely bad idea. Don't do that. But yeah, I mean, so many of the problems, and we talk about this on our individual shows all the time. Like if we have such a rote, innate singularity like focus on the individual in this country. If we stop to think about collective action for like 3.5 seconds, we'd realize that every problem I've ever talked about would just go away. Honestly, I'd close the show down. I have nothing to talk about. If we just thought collectively, I'd hang up my apron. Screw it, right? Like there'd be nothing to talk about. We'd be like, hey guys, we're making bread this week, and our country cares about us. Peace, right? Like that'd be it. That'd be the whole show every week,
Yep.
right? Like, but
yeah.
we've talked about think about your neighbor, think about the people in your community who are differently able than you, and then think bigger than that, right? Like imagine everyone's your family member, right? You only think that's small, then like everyone's family, right? We're a giant Olive Garden, guys. Just think about it that way.
Giant Olive Garden is a really great analogy.
We should become the United States of Olive Garden. I 100% vote in favor of this. I need a candidate who's running on this.
Olive Garden for all.
Yeah, Olive Garden for all. Yeah, unlimited breadsticks for all. But I want to close out our conversation. I want to talk about some hopefulness. So we talked a lot of doom and gloom, and I like smiling, and I think other human beings like smiling. So let's talk about some hopeful stuff. There are so many inventions out there that help people with their disabilities, right? There are some that we can kind of see, right? People who have wheelchairs either are electrified or have shopping baskets or have like other electronics attached to them, cochlear implants like we were talking about earlier, right? People are having their brains experimented on to see if they can see some types of light again. I mean, yeah, tell me what you think about that. I mean, it's just for me, like there is hope if only we would find it.
Yeah, I think sometimes I think about the collective experience of humanity, and it is something to be proud of. And I think so often we're thinking about like us in our individual lives and our personal lives, and like haven't dialed back enough to think, oh, like my mom has a disability, or my neighbor or my cousin or somebody I work with has a disability. Like we're not even zoomed out that much. But if we zoom out even further, sometimes I think about, man, like we're all in this together and we get to create history together. And we've created a lot of history already, humans. We've come a long way. Recently, I watched a documentary about how, for example, the Phoenicians developed the alphabet, which led to us being able to write to each other, to being able to communicate so quickly on an iPhone to each other, where we're FaceTiming and texting and writing emails to each other. And our society is kind of amazing. I think that we often don't think about how innovative we've been And this is one example of it, is like, how can we help people with disabilities? I recently saw a video of someone with ALS being able to use a computer with the motion of their eyes. And I
Yes.
think
Oh
that's
my God. I saw that video.
yeah,
Yeah. I know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
incredible. And I think we're so focused on ourselves that it's important to think about zooming out and being like, man, like, what can we accomplish together as humans? Like, it doesn't really matter what border you're in, if you're Pennsylvanian or American or
I
um,
appreciate that Pennsylvanians are separate from Americans for some reason. We're outside the great bubble that is America.
oh no, I was just zooming out. But I
I'm
also
just teasing
former
you.
Pennsylvanian.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was gonna say. Like, watch yourself, Lauren.
yeah, but like, it doesn't really matter what corner of the world you're in. Like, we're all in this together, and the faster that we embrace that and lift each other up, I can't imagine what we can build together if we're not trying to bring each other down.
And I want to just mention two examples of this. One, if the name Addie Barkin doesn't ring a bell, just stop, click away from this video and just Google that name. He
Yeah,
is a living legend, and he is. I forget exactly what his disability is, and I feel bad for not remembering. But
he has ALS,
he has
Lou
ALS,
Gehrig's disease. Yeah,
and okay, and so he's in front of Congress all the time. He uses his life. He is in this contraption that allows him to speak and move around. And it's like, honestly, it's so incredible. We can take his thought, like he can't move his mouth. We can take his thoughts and make them into words that he communicate with people, like with speech, right? Forget writing, forget like anything that takes any effort. He can actually do the thing. I could have him on the show, Addie, if you're out there. But it's like, it's amazing. We have the ability, and people are studying this stuff all the time. Like, there are people who care. It's so hard to see
yeah,
it when we're where we are, just like you said. But like Addie Barkin is a great example of this. He goes out to all these places where there's trouble, regardless of what the trouble is, and he's an advocate for people everywhere. And he has it hard. Like, I'm not going to pretend that his life is easy, but he thinks collectively, right? And he's so inspiring. And like, that's something that we should aspire to. We don't all have to get ALS to do that, right? We can be good people without that, right? But we can think about the other people around us. The other thing I want to think about is something that hits a little closer to home for all of us. Like, think about the pandemic for a second, right? So COVID-19 was discovered what? End of 2019. And because there was a concerted effort around the world to get the genome sequenced out there and to start working on vaccines and to start thinking about it from like a medical perspective, I think what the Chinese government, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, very quickly,
yeah,
almost the blink of an eye, had the genome out there to every scientist, right? And any scientist who could receive it had access to that genome. They could start working on it. They could start figuring it out. As humanity, we've done so much, and we have the power to think and act collectively. Like COVID-19, as much as it is shown which people are not willing to act collectively, shows that there's a whole world of people who want to do that, right? There are
yeah,
movements all over for vaccine equity to make sure that like life-saving medicine can be given to people all over the world. The COVAX program, although it's not as successful as I'd like it to be, it is still a sign that there are people out there, even some people who have power, God forbid, who are thinking about the world in a collective way. And so,
yeah,
like, I just want you to take that little bit of hopium, and just breathe it in. Just enjoy the fact that, like, if you really do zoom out, if you step away from your computer, from this conversation, and look around in the world, you can see there is collaboration everywhere. There is like the desire to help those who cannot help themselves, whether it's because they're sick or because they're disabled or because they're differently abled or whatever, right? There is the desire out there. And it's so important that we raise up those stories too, because at the end of the day, that is us. It has to be. It's the only way we move forward at all.
yeah, absolutely. I think it is important to really recognize that, and also to be thinking what each of us can do to help one another, whether it's advocate a little bit, making sure your disabled neighbor has what they need, offering to go grocery shopping for them. Like, it's really the little things that make a huge difference in the long run.
Yeah, and there are so many. If you live in a city, there's a mutual. I can promise you, there's a mutual aid somewhere that needs your help. They either need your groceries, or they need your money, or they need your time. Find a mutual aid. They are spending their time helping people who are differently able to get groceries because they can't. Right? They're helping individuals who are sick get groceries and things like that. People who aren't allowed to leave the house, immunocompromised persons. Right? Find a mutual aid organization and help them, because that's something that you can do right now. Right after you watch this video. Even during you're watching this video, you can do that right now for someone else. We mentioned the ACLU. They're a great organization that are defending people's rights, including the rights and access of differently abled and disabled people. You can donate to them. You can volunteer your time, especially if you're a lawyer, right? You can donate your time if that's the type of work that you do, right? Don't just think about this little bit of hope that we've given you in a like, this is someone else's problem, someone else is going to take care of it. You can help take care of it too.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think about like how much time I put into my campaign for Congress, and honestly, I don't think I would do it again. I'm glad I did it once, but now I'm thinking about how much time I have for issue advocacy, for example, or volunteering for an organization like ACLU. And that is the kind of activism that got me involved in politics in the first place. I was really active in like the local women's rights movement, but yeah, I mean, we can each do something, and it could be as simple as you joining a phone bank for a local cause, or writing postcards to your neighbors about stopping a power plant from coming to your neighborhood and that kind of thing. So there's so many
Hashtag
ways to
stop
get
line
involved.
3.
Yeah, and also like you said, getting involved with your local mutual aid is one of the most important things to do right now.
Yeah, because we are all dependent on each other. Like, as much as it seems like we're in the rat race on our own, that we're in the grind on our own every day, sun up, sun down, like, I know there's a lot of that time you don't get back. Trust me, I work for a corporation. I hear you. But, like, think about the things you do on your time off, right? Like, Lauren and I spend our time off doing this advocacy work, her on her channel, me on mine, right? Being involved with other organizations, and sometimes you don't have to be so dived in. You don't have to spend every waking moment working with this stuff, but like, be a dues paying member of an organization that does this kind of work, right? Even if you don't have the time, sometimes it's good for them to have both time and money. There are ways, regardless of your situation, whether you feel like you're working all the time, or whether you feel like you have more money than time, or more time than money, or whatever it's going to be, or even just the ability to, if you know someone, right, who's similarly situated, right, helping them out. You don't have to do your good work through someone else's good work. You can be a
Yep.
good person all by yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I agree with this.
there you go. We've solved the whole problem. Just kidding, we haven't solved the whole problem. But
Yes, all of Congress should listen to this conversation.
yeah, 100%. Write your congressperson, and if you can attach something in the thing, attach this. Does
I'm
YouTube
gonna
let you
create.
download things? They definitely don't do that.